Astrology is the myths of the stars and planets, telling the themes and plots of our lives. These stories come to us daily through our satellite, the Moon. She is constantly spinning astro news. Hi, I'm Mary Lynn LeBlanc with Moonwise. Today, Daniel Fiverson and myself are going to address an energy shift that will be an overriding quality of the next year and a half. Welcome back to Moonwise, Daniel.
Thank you, Mary Lynn.
The shift we're going to talk about is that of the Moon's nodes. This week, the Moon's nodes are the Moon's true node is going to make a shift. Tell us about that shift, Daniel.
Well, the shift is going to be from cardinal Cancer Capricorn into mutable Gemini and Sagittarius. And maybe we should just take a minute and talk about what the new nodes really are and what they represent. They are actual points in space. However, there is no physical body there that's a node. They are the intersection of the Earth's ecliptic, which is its orbit around the sun, and the orbit of the moon around the Earth. And where those two orbits intersect are the lunar nodes. So the south node is where the moon moves to the south, crosses the western horizon at the end of the day, and the north node is where the moon moves to the north, rising above the ascendant and the eastern horizon at the beginning of the day. And the south node represents our past. It's what has come before, what we have brought with us. The north node I categorize as a probable future. And we can talk about that a little further. The south node, the south node is a composite of the moon's former habitual patterns, the moon's our habitual emotional nature that we've picked up from the past. If you are comfortable with reincarnation, it correlates to our past lives. If you don't have to believe in reincarnation, it will correlate to the emotional experiences of our childhood. So we're looking at a trajectory from past to future. And what this represents from an astrological perspective and evolutionary perspective is this is the evolutionary and karmic axis from past to future. And the past is pretty much our habitual way of responding, the future being, I kind of describe it as a magical moving sidewalk. It's like the walkway at the airport that we arrive at carrying all our luggage, our heavy suitcases. In one arm, we have one that's so heavy it drags on the ground. Those are our life lessons. And in the other arm, we're carrying a suitcase that's so light we don't even realize that we have it. Those are the gifts and fruitions that we've brought from the past. And this is what we bring with us. The North Node is a probable future only because we are conscious beings. And our future tomorrow, next week, next year, next month, whatever, is determined by the choices that we make today in the present. Western astrology often likes to suggest that we need to get out of our south node somehow. I kind of disagree with that because we can't get out of that. That's who we are by nature. It's who we've been for lifetimes. The synthesis here that's required is in or through the natal moon in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm. I like to look at the south node as our being able to use some of our innate talents and tools that we're very familiar with to further us along in our improvement. But now, just to kind of take what you said about the North and the South Node, let's look at the last year and a half while the North Node was in the sign of Cancer and the South Node was in the sign of Capricorn. Right. Based on what on what you were saying, you know, Capricorn, starting with the South Node, either the past or whatever, what we've seen, a lot of things from the past we've seen fall apart in terms of structures. I mean, especially at the end of this cycle of the moon going through the sign of the moon's node going through the sign of Capricorn. I might want to mention also that there are two there because the moon, just a little bit of the mechanics, because the moon's node that it's a point in space, this intersection point that you referred to, it wobbles frequently. And some of us astrologers, instead of using the true node, which is what we're talking about today, some of us use the mean node, and which is an average of it. Right. And that average is not going to change until a month from now, in June 6th, I believe. And but just the quality of the past being Capricorn. I mean, we've looked at government as we've seen it in the past, right, and see it not functioning the way it used to function in the past. It's not, this kind of goes to that belief of letting go of it. It's not serving the people very well at all. Whereas the North Node has been in Cancer, which is a sign of the individual as well as family, but it's really highly focused on the development of the individual. And what we've seen as the moon's node shifts into another sign is we've seen more of a need to be regarding each individually and not leaving out anybody when it comes to the basic necessities of a livelihood. I mean, that's my perspective of it in general. How do you see it, Daniel?
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree absolutely. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon is our ego. It's how we see ourselves. It's our emotional body. Capricorn correlates, as you said, to the structure of society. It's the rules and mores and regulations and ethics and of consensus reality that we agree to, so we can all live together in community and society. But Capricorn also relates to the father, if you would, to Saturn and to patriarchy. And a lot of what we have seen emerging over the past 18 months is a resurgence or a greater awareness, if you would, of the failure of patriarchy, of the failure of the need to control, of the need to be dominant, of the need to somehow be in charge at the expense of all the yin, receptive feminine energy in the world. Though both of these signs are yang, they're both cardinal, they're both, energy moving outward from the center. The object of Cancer is really to find safety, to find sanctuary. It's where we feel safest. Capricorn, on the other hand, is where we have to be out in part of a larger community where we maybe don't feel quite as safe, where we are exposed, and where we have to kind of give up some of our personal freedoms in order to, again, get along with everybody else.
Exactly. So now we're going to go into a shift. Right. And how do you see that shift occurring?
Well, the shift is, as I said, it's from a cardinal sign to an adaptable sign. Both Gemini and Sagittarius are very, very adaptable. But what's interesting is, we have to look at the chart of the Ingress, because the Ingress moment of this nodal Ingress really is the template or the blueprint for the entire 18-month period. Even though these planetary placements will change over the next 18 months, where it begins just sets a tone. It sets a base note for how things will unfold. And at the Ingress, Mercury, who is will now be the ruler of the lunar North Node, is conjunct the Sun in Taurus. And we actually have a square to the lunar nodes from Sun and Mercury at this ingress, which is actually the squarest to the Capricorn planets, not to the node. One of the things that has intensified this last 18 months to such a great degree is the transit of Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn through Capricorn, and also meeting up with the South Node, amplifying all that energy, and they're all about to go back over it again because we're headed into retrograde season. Also, it's already begun. Pluto is already retrograde. Saturn is retrograde, and Jupiter and Venus and Pallas Athena will follow through the balance of this month. So we're going to see this Capricorn energy not only embedded in the square from the Sun and Mercury to these Capricorn planets at the ingress, but we're going to see a relive, a rejoin, a revisit experiences over the next few months as Saturn and Pluto go back over these Capricorn points again.
Yeah, that's going to be... It's a heavy duty.
Right.
Well, these are just heavy duty times in general. Interesting. Again, to focus on the South Node of letting go is that in a way, because of Jupiter being in Capricorn and pretty much being there through most of this year, there's going to be towards the end of the year a little movement into the next sign, Aquarius. But the fact that in some ways the sign of Capricorn continues to be brought into that South Node energy, which is that release point, that point of what do we have to rely on from the past that we can use to improve us, and what do we need to let go of during the past. And what comes to my mind with the Jupiter, because, we're talking about Jupiter and Saturn now because Jupiter rules the sign of Sagittarius, the sign before Capricorn, Saturn's sign. But the two of them together are looked at as a polarity that move us along socially in some ways. Right. And one of the things that Jupiter tends to do that a lot of astrologers don't talk about is preserve what the status quo is. It's not, and if you go to the mythology, you see a little bit of this with Jupiter. Jupiter did not continue the patterns of his father and his grandfather in terms of trying to get rid of his offspring. On the other hand, he knew that there were universal principles that had to be maintained. So when he was caught doing something that was off kilter, he kind of, went back to, okay, we've got to, keep things on an even playing field, so to speak. And consequently, what I've noticed with Jupiter and Saturn is that unless something really, really strong happens, Jupiter will maintain the status quo, and so we look at what's happening now in terms of state government, in terms of this pandemic that we're in, and what state governments are doing, what federal government is doing, what individuals are doing. We're kind of in a melange of the majority want security, and we're talking about the moon relationship here because lunar stuff is primarily about our security. Right. And, this is the sign of Cancer, is primarily about how do we make sure that things are the way they are and continue to develop the way that keeps them whole and complete. There's a wholeness kind of process to it. And Jupiter shares that very strongly.
Well, Jupiter, interesting, or I kind of like to work with it as Zeus. we don't have a lot of Jupiter mythology, but we have a lot of Zeus mythology. And one of the things that I've come away with, reading the mythology of Zeus, is that the thing that he seemed to be most concerned with, besides, randying about with as many nymphs and that he could find, was to maintain to be worshipped by mankind. That was key to him. He wanted people to show up in his temples. He needed adoration. He's not Leo. He's Sagittarius. He's a fire sign. He's about his own self-actualization and his own egoic expression, if you would. And so, I agree with you, but I think that his motive was more and less in maintaining the status quo, was in maintaining his popularity, his popularity rating. In order, he didn't have to get reelected, but he needed to stay popular. He needed people to, come and worship him. It's been suggested that one of the reasons Pluto was so unhappy is nobody built temples to him. He snatched Persephone, and he set up his own kind of empire down below because nobody was worshiping him, and he kind of felt left out.
This is an overlay. This perspective on yours is an overlay of your own Leo energy.
Well, yeah,
because Sagittarius to me is a sign that it has a very strong sense, inner sense of identity, and knowledge that comes from. But it's very
personal. It's why it becomes evangelism and it becomes proselytizing. There are two kinds of truth. There's a personal truth, which is really based on opinion and a personal belief based on somebody's own experiences, mostly embedded in their PTSD, the trauma that they've carried with them. And then there's ultimate truth, which really correlates to Pisces. And that's the Jupiter co-rulership of Pisces, if you would. But in Sagittarius, I think he's more human. There's more of that human quality. He hasn't quite, gotten to that point of enlightenment or, pure wisdom. He is about wisdom and metaphysics and cosmology.
But he holds on to the agreed upon, entrenched rules and regulations.
Yes, he walks a middle path very often, except when he wants to play. In order to maintain that that sense of equilibrium, if you would.
And yet, there's a need for some freedom, and that's where his escapades come about.
Right. Well, that's the fire.
And that's an interesting thing. Going back to the nodes, and we do need to take a break in a moment. But going back to the Sagittarius South node that we'll be having now for the next year and a half, is that in some ways it looks like, and this makes total sense of what's going on today, is we're going to have to give up some of our freedoms for a while.
Well, we already have.
But I mean, that's going to continue, I would say, even though people are thinking that, it's coming to an end. You're listening to Moonwise here on KSFR 101.1 FM or streaming on the web at ksfr.org, where you can always make a contribution and keep shows like Moonwise and other programs that KSFR produces here on the air. KSFR relies heavily on your support, so please make that contribution today if you can. And Daniel Fiverson and myself will be back with more Moonwise after the Moon Minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to Moonwise. I'm Mary Lynn LeBlanc, and today I have as my guest Daniel Fiverson, astrologer here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we're talking about the moon's nodes, those points in space where the moon intercepts with the ecliptic. And it's sort of like, two roads crossing each other. And, which way are we going to go? And this shift is taking us into the territory of Gemini, that's the North Node. Where do we need to go? And using the resources of the past node when they're appropriate, otherwise letting them go. And that's in Sagittarius. And we've talked quite a bit about Jupiter and Sagittarius before. Maybe we should get a little bit about Mercury and that North Node in Gemini, Daniel.
Yeah, let's kind of shift gears here a bit. Because Gemini and Sag are both cognitive functions. One is our left brain, one's our right brain. One is our more rational brain, and the other implies more to our intuitive possibilities. And Jupiter, just to jump on Jupiter just one more time, Jupiter is about the search for truth. And I think that this entire movement, across this axis of Jupiter, of Sag and Gemini, is about the search for truth. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury becomes, as I said, the ruler of that North Node. And Mercury has many faces. And one of the ones that I think is most interesting is his role as psychopomp. He was the messenger of the gods. He was the only god who could enter and leave the underworld without harm. And what we're going to need to do over this next 18 months is go into our own underworld, our individual underworld and our collective underworld. And we have the safety of Mercury, his ability to go in and enter and see that shadow and integrate it and reconnect the shadow, make what is unconscious conscious again. Because this is what really needs to happen. It's our shadow that has been oozing out of the Capricorn South Node for the past year and a half. And now the thrust is going to be to really look at the truth of that shadow and look at the truth of what is really happening in the world. I think one of the most interesting examples of it is Michael Moore's new movie, Planet of the Humans,
Yes.
where he, we have solar panels. When Susan and I put solar panels on there, we thought that was the greatest thing we could do, since buying our house. And we're thrilled with it. We have no electric bill. We actually sell some of our electricity back to the electric company every month. But however, when I learned that the amount of coal and silicon that's needed, the mining industry that supports the production of these solar panels, and the amount of carbon-based energy that has to be burned in order to run, to back up these huge, supposedly 100%, free, resource and 100% carbon-free resources. It's remarkable. What Michael Moore is saying basically is not that what we're doing is bad, but the realization that 40 years of environmental activism hasn't worked. And it's really been proven by COVID, because the skies have cleared, the CO2 emissions have diminished, the skies over India and China are clear again, which proves to us that we have been doing something chronically wrong in terms of the environment. And this is one of the truths, inconvenient truths. Unfortunately, he's supposedly part of the cabal.
He's also acknowledged that, yes.
The industrialists have taken it over. Once white men realize something's profitable, they all jump in. And rich white men. So
we've neglected just the fact that to advance the technology, we still have to use some of the old technology.
We have to use all of it. We have to use all of it.
And that part of the picture has been pretty much left out up until the present time.
Right.
But 3 more minutes. Gemini, the North Node. This has been more like the South Node. The Gemini, from what you were saying, takes me into the territory of transportation and communication, and how we do that on an individual level. How do we do that on an individual level that is more environmentally sensitive? This Gemini is a sign that talks about our environment, our immediate environment, as well as, Mercury has a lot to do with the whole environment and how things are connected, associated, interlinked, et cetera. And there are many areas that we could explore, and the technology is certainly a big one given the climate demands of our times. Right. So any last words on
I think that we have to take all the we have to take the Jupiter intuition, and we have to ground it, Taurus, in rational thinking. We have to get more. We have to get down to earth with some of these sciences that we're working with, and actually look at what they're doing. From the end result, not necessarily from the dream inception of it. We have to see how these things have actually worked, and we have to begin to work on the work itself and refine it. And we have to come back to the earth. That's the other thing. We really need to have respect. We really need to reconnect with the earth around us. We have lost our connection. We don't realize the myriad ways that we are connected to this planet, and we are very, very close to a point of no return in terms of our relationship with nature and with the planet. And it's huge. Jupiter is shamanism. Jupiter is nature. We have to get back to nature. We have to get back to what is actually supporting us on this planet.
It's also interesting. The nodes return to signs every approximately 19 years, 18 and a half years. And so it was back in 2001 that we last had the moon's nodes in the Gemini Sagittarius axis. And that was around the time when Al Gore came out with Inconvenient Truth.
Right.
It's sort of
right.
a theme reoccurring in some
They've
ways.
thrown a lot of money at it, but they haven't necessarily fixed it.
Yes, and to be, I guess, honest, it's sort of like at least there has been some concern and care about where we're heading, and we're getting a fuller picture today.
Right.
And the picture is disturbing,
right,
to say the least. Daniel, you can be reached at?
I can be reached at 505-930-2748 or at my website, the number 4, evolutionaryastrology.com.
Yes, so all of you out there have a wonderful week. We'll be back here next week on KSFR. You've been listening to Moonwise. Coming up next is Climate One. This is KSFR, White Rock, Santa Fe Public Radio.